action against councils in England that fail to speed up their adoption processes. David Cameron has warned that if they don't improve, poorly performing councils may have their adoption services taken over by more effective authorities. Figures released by the Department of Education show that only 3,050 children were adopted in the 12 months up until March this year. Part of the problem is that the process is so complex, meaning that according to the latest figures, children have to wait on average 2 years and 7 months to be adopted. The Prime Minister today highlighted figures showing that only 60 babies were adopted in England last year. Our social affairs correspondent Rita Chakrabarti reports.
Roger and Helen are an adoption success story. They adopted 3 children through an agency, Quorum, and have never looked back. But they first approached their local authority and were told in no uncertain terms that Roger's age would count against them.
The fact that I was older than the average adopter, I suspect, I was well into my 50s at the time, this was held by them to be a complete and utter disadvantage, and they could not even countenance the idea of taking it any further.
It's stories like that that have prompted David Cameron to make adoption a political priority, and he spent the morning meeting adoptive parents. Key to his approach is to name and shame local councils which take too long to get children adopted.
On average, children are waiting over 2.5 years to get adopted, and that's just not good enough. So there's a massive gap between the practice of best authorities and the worst. And we need a real culture change in this country to be more pro-adoption. For many children, it is the right answer.
The government is frustrated at councils which limit the pool of prospective adopters by rejecting them because of age or ethnicity. So it's ranked local authorities according to their performance on adoption and also what happens to children in their care. The league tables show that York, South Tyneside and Hartlepool came top over the last 3 years for placing those destined for adoption with families in the legal timescale of 12 months. Hackney and Brent came bottom, but they did well on GCSE scores for teenagers in their care. Some, like Devon, scored highly on speed of adoption over the 3 years, but performed poorly last year. Adoption is one of the most emotive issues. The vast majority of children in care will have experienced profound neglect or abuse and need very sensitive parenting. Many social workers agree that the system at the moment is too slow, but they say decisions about adoption simply can't be rushed.
Adoption is a really complex process. We're talking about children who've often been very damaged because of their early experiences, and we need to make sure that we get the right people with the right skills and commitment and motivation to adopt these children so we have successful adoption.
The family that Roger and Helen created is the ideal that everyone wants to see. But with 1 in 5 adoptions breaking down, help after the process is seen by many as just as important as speeding it up. Rita Chakrabarti, BBC News.
Well, joining me now is Jan Fishwick, the Chief Executive of Parents and Children Together, an organisation which helps with the adoption process, and the Vice Chair of the Consortium of Voluntary Adoption Agencies. And in our Northampton studio is Jimmy Christian, who's recently adopted his wife's daughter. Jimmy, how easy or how difficult was the process for you?
We felt as a family that it was an extremely lengthy and difficult process for us to go through. Especially we'd been a family unit for a number of years prior to us starting the adoption process. We felt there was systemic issues with the county council that we were dealing with, and we also felt a bit disenfranchised from raising any concerns, and also felt that it was quite an intrusive process. And I think it's really important that the points that David Cameron's raised today is highlighting the issues around adoption, and anything that can be done to speed that process up is really important.
Jan, just listening to Jimmy there, I mean, he makes the obvious point. They were a family unit as well, so it must be even more difficult for people who are not or have different circumstances. Is that because that's unique to his case or that county council, or is it something that you hear a lot about?
What we find is that most adopters appreciate that the process has to be very thorough. We're making sure that the families that children are placed with are safe and loving and supportive to help them through to adulthood, and for a lot of children to have help with the trauma that they've suffered through the abuse and neglect that they've had at home before they were moved. And so we do promote a very thorough assessment.
Does that mean long as well, inevitably, because a lot of checks have got to be made?
It may seem a long time, but most adopters that we work with appreciate why it takes the time it does. I think there is opportunity to make it more efficient and to look at the ways in which we might work better together, more collaboratively, with partnerships between local authorities and voluntary adoption agencies. But at the very heart of adoption is always the child, and we have to ensure their needs are met.
Jimmy, are you presumably you agree with almost all of that, and certainly that it has to be a thorough process and the child at the centre of it. But are you saying that there were particular things that were just sort of bureaucratic that got in the way in your case?
Yeah, absolutely, and we would absolutely agree that the child's safe being is the forefront of the decision that needs to be made. I think the amount of paperwork that we had to go through, the length of time between visits from the social workers, I think the amount of staff who were able to work on the case caused significant delays in our particular circumstances. It went 6 months at one point when nobody at all was looking at the case. And I think also better communications between the social services and the court services definitely needs to be part of any kind of new processes going forward.
Does that mean, Jimmy, not to simplify this too much though, but if local councils are facing cuts, this may actually be a slower process in the future rather than a faster one if they're not the people there available to do all the checks that you want or you need?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the resourcing of the social services with our particular city council did cause significant delays with us, and I think it's really important that whatever mechanisms are put in place in future, I understand with the cuts and that which are going on at the minute, but I think particular attention needs to be paid to this.
Do you think it's realistic to have a 12-month kind of timetable for this, as the Prime Minister was suggesting today?
Yes, I think it is. But Jimmy's point about resources is very important. And with the cuts, there are fewer people doing this work, and that won't help this. There's also cuts in terms of support that are given to adopters throughout the child's life. These children have been traumatised. They need post-adoption support until they're adults, and that's being cut as well. And it's a disincentive for adopters to come forward and to put themselves forward for what can be a really challenging but rewarding task. We would encourage more people to come forward and come and talk to us in the voluntary adoption agencies, because there are many more adopters out there that could do this for children. There are many children who wait, too many children waiting too long in care, waiting for a family.
But Jimmy, did you have to be really determined to do this? I mean, you obviously were not going to give up, were you?
No, absolutely. No, we knew exactly what it was we wanted. We wanted to be a proper cohesive family unit, and there was no way we were going to give up. But I would think that couples who are not in the same situation would go so far down the line and just think, what can we do? What can we do? When these child need homes, we're willing to give them one. And it just seems to be one obstacle after another into sorting that out for them. OK, we'll leave it there. Jimmy, Christian, Jan Fishwick, thank you both very much. Thank you. Now, let's catch up with the weather. Matt Taylor is here. Matt.
Thank you very much, Gavin. Good evening to you. Or whether it's a journey home from work still awaiting you,